How to invent a religion.
I always knew you had to be willing to die to even do this job.
Can't stop what's coming. Executive orders.
The creation and the maintenance of a secret government within our government.
Is something wrong? With what? With anything?
I feel like you want to rip your face off.
There's something wrong with everything.
I was so spun.
What's the most you ever lost in the coin toss?
The law of the jungle, sir.
The most you ever lost in the coin toss?
You don't know what you're talking about. Good son. I said, you don't know what you're talking about.
Suppression of unrest and dissent. Domestic anti-terrorism.
I don't have some way to put it. That's the way it is.
All right, internet denizens. You know what the ritual is. Blackballed Rollie Quaid right here on revisionmedia.org. And we got Richard Carey on the line. Richard, are you there, sir? Richard Carey,
yes,
CEO,
I am, sir.
Wears many hats. He's the owner and founder of Vision Media, and he's definitely the cornerstone of this network.
Oh, well, thank you, Rollie.
Richard, there's some big news about the dancing Israelis back during 9/11. There seems to be 10 new photos that surfaced from a FOIA request. Have you heard of anything about that?
No. Who were the people who put in the request? Freedom of Information Act?
There's a Twitter user by the name of Pepe the Unredacted Frog that filed that. So we're getting into like unspecific name characters just off the bat right there and there. And he doesn't want any credit, apparently. He's known for shit posting. And it's actually amazing if you think about it, like, you know, that I did FOIA requests for Meth Messiah. And I tried to get pictures of the meth lab, the mega meth lab over in Iowa. And I filled out 3 dozen FOIA requests, for 3 dozen different agencies.
Okay.
Got nothing. You know,
Really?
bureaucracy does not want to get off their butts to do stuff. They rather just sit tight and they're like, who's this guy? Is his name, you know, Judith Miller? You know, if Judith Miller was a man, but, you know, or a big name guy at New York Times or Washington Post. No. So then they don't really feel compelled to answer my questions about Meth Messiah, for example. So it's strange that for somebody who's known for 4chan sort of adolescent, you know, post to be able to get a FOIA request to figure out the missing link, you know, or part of the missing link, because for 9/11, like, what were the dancing Israelis, the 5 dancing Israelis that knew and were recording and surveilling the Twin Towers, you know, beforehand, right from the high rise of their moving company, which was, of course, Mossad Front, Urban Moving Systems.
Yeah, it was, an event that ever since we've had people trying to dismiss, of course, a lot of these people try to singly blame Saudi hijackers. That usually goes hand in hand with a lot of the people who will dismiss the dancing Israelis, right?
Yeah, that's correct. And we've had my guest, Steve Deock, actually mention that that they're kind of like the thread that's the scapegoat beyond it. They were just like everybody else. And, you know, like Steve has stellar research when it comes to 9/11, but this is a contingency that I have to override and disagree and duel with.
So what was up with these new... I'm sorry, but what was up with these new photos, Rollie? Fill us in.
Okay, about the photos itself, they released 10 photos, and they're very poor quality. and they don't show any of the faces for any of the dancing Israelis. And it's kind of like the game Who's Who or Match or whatever it is with the blocks. And it seems to be a copy of a copy of a copy, and it's all black and white and very grainy. But at least it shows that they were at the high rise of their workplace, the Mossad front, Urban Moving Systems, and they were facing south. They were at the Hackensack side, facing the towers. I think it was southwest. Don't quote me on the direction, but they knew beforehand, and they set up shop, and they had their lighters ready, and they were sitting there smoking when they're supposed to be working. This time of day, movers, right? Beginning of work, no downtime, no rest for the weary. So that's the big, story itself. It's just, and I really don't think it's much closure as well. The timing of the whole thing is very suspicious as well, Richard, especially since we're getting into the new Palestine, and there's not going to be any settlers anymore with this new bill, the deal of the century, the Trump and Kushner bill, that essentially gives 40% of West Bank to Israel. They're just going to confiscate it after the end of Ramadan. So maybe they're releasing these photos so that we would get our wheels turning about this particular issue, and not what Trump is going to roll out for us.
Well, so 40% of the land that remains of all of Palestine, you're saying? Just the settlement area.
There's the settlement areas. It's
right.
Peppered all across
West Bank,
the
and
occupied
Gaza
territory. So they're just going to legitimize it and make it officially Israel.
What about the other 60%?
It's going to be called what's called New Palestine.
So they
it's
are
its own country.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be apart from Gaza.
Well, they just want it to be some sort of, I don't know, similar to a prison work factory, I'd say, that they can have next door. Just indentured servitude sort of environment they can exploit, much the way we benefit in the West through our current capitalism, having products manufactured in the Far East, pennies on the dollar, that sort of thing. And, they don't want to integrate racially for the most part, as much as they are trying to force it, of course, on all the European nations. So that's part, I think, of why they want the new Palestine. The hardcore Zionists, they don't want any Jews who are not of the DNA they approve of, like North Africans, rather. They're trying to get rid of all of the black North African Jews who've been trying to immigrate to Israel and threaten them. You come back to our shores, we'll shoot you,
Yeah, exactly.
Now, I think it's tricky when you bring up these points because, I don't discredit nationalism as much as I discredit the hypocrisy, with those people.
Yeah, and there's a double standard with them. It's a double-edged sword as well, because they want nationalism for themselves and they won't want other people to be autonomous. The only nation that they approve of actually being an ethno-state tends to be Israel itself. And most of us, we really don't care about Muslim people at all. Yemen's a case in point. Palestine itself is a case in point. And we tend to think of, the Jews could have that scorpion-infested patch of land for all that I care. But it really does matter. Land in the Middle East really does matter, especially since the fuels our nation, itself, these petrochemicals that are in the palaces of the princes and sheiks. That distribution of resources really does matter. And if Israel becomes a unchecked sole superpower, while America's over here eventually going to tear each other apart and maybe even have a Soviet-style collapse, it's going to have pending consequences on us.
Well, we've been fighting so many wars for Israel. We don't even question being in the Middle East so much anymore. I mean, the American people and the Israeli lobby, it just takes it for granted now. It's same with this, like 38 billion most recently. You know, the kind of money we give them yearly is unprecedented. And well, now I know there's a lot of disputes with other nations over. I mean, you know, we're fighting their wars for them, and in addition to that, we have to pay them. It's pretty absurd. Poland is in a big dispute right now. I know over well, Israel wants them to give reparations, financial, and also there's a dispute between Germany and Poland. So Poland is saying, no, we shouldn't have to give any to Israel, but Germany, you should give some to us. It's all about the money. You know, these people just exploit it. Once you have some Zionists at the top who spin this, this narrative, it's, the World War II narrative of the Holocaust. It's just exploited by anyone and everyone for their own personal gain.
Right, and many people have actually argued that 9/11 happened because America was not looking after its own self-interest, but was looking after Israel's self-interest. Zionist actually means Israel first in all matters. It just means a land for Jews, a homeland. It literally means that you put Israel first in all matters. And there's thundering silence in the mainstream media about this FISA documents being released, and there was thundering silence when it actually came to the 200-man intelligence apparatus that was broken up directly after 9/11. And the man that would become the Secretary of Homeland Security, Chertoff, made damn sure that he didn't want Israel to be embarrassed and rush these dancing Israelis that weren't, disco dancing. They were celebrating the demise of the Twin Towers, a very significant and structure, to America itself. And they didn't want to embarrass Israel. And they didn't want to embarrass Israel further with the spy ring. And they stayed silent about that as well.
Well, that reminds me of the Liberty. They didn't want to embarrass Israel regarding the USS Liberty as well.
And we're off doing dangerous missions, for the behest of Israel. And just like the USS Liberty that didn't sink, but damn near sure, and killed many of the crew, they were trying to get America involved in a war with Egypt. And they got us in a war with all of the Middle East and much of North Africa with the war on terror. And they even want to go to the Far East, to Persia right now, to Iran. And
we're desensitized. That's my complaint, is we're all desensitized to the war agenda now. Why are we in the Middle East so continuously? No one wonders why. And, why we're in everyone else's backyard. And, what the motives
we can't clean up house.
What's that?
We don't clean up house.
Yeah.
It's very corrupt here. And with Donald Trump in the White House, our Twitterer-in-chief, he's swamping the drain.
Well, it's about oil. It's not just about Israel. I know it's about oil as well. The U.S. will benefit to some extent. But they also just want tall poppy syndrome with countries, who try to get uppity with the kind of requirements. Trade with the U.S. dollar, for example, that props up a lot of the U.S. economy. But right now we're seeing too many nations stray where that's not really the. Regardless, I don't justify it. We need to get rid of everyone in government. We need to stop these kind of approaches. We need to get rid of the Federal Reserve. But certainly the Israeli lobby is the first thing I would take out.
And it's sad because to effect, Congress has become a foreign agent for a foreign power, and the Gucci suit men that are always waiting in the lobby, that's why they call them lobbyists, are ready to twist their hands, and it's gotten to the point where it's not really twisting your hands, for the state of Israel. It's become too cozy with the lobbies itself. They hand out the policies that they want to give to them on a silver platter, and they just implement it. And there's kickbacks and pay for that. And the only race they care about, the only color they care about is lining up their own pockets, the color green. And there are definitely politicians that have a deep love of Israel. But then, most of them really are just terminally corrupt, and they'll just follow anything. They're just sheep, just like the masses.
I know you were discussing an organization related to cyber spying that kind of fits into all this you're possibly going to bring up later in the program, right?
Yeah, so there's this group called the NSO group. They make this thing called Pegasus, which you could literally hack into anybody's cell phones with, and the software itself costs $40,000, and they'll sell it to anybody. Any bidder they'll sell it to. And Roman Abramovich, which is the richest man in Israel, he's the fourth richest Russian oligarch who just moved to Israel just last year that I wrote a story about, who's really close to Gal Gadot, the IDF Wonder Woman. And essentially what we're seeing is a birth of an octopus, and it's going to have his daddy's eyes. It's going to be a gigantic tech octopus, and it's going to have the eyes of Roman all over it. And it has implications of just like the mafia written all over it, because they'll sell it to anybody. $40,000, they'll give you hacking tools. That's all you need.
So, supplies private companies with whatever sort of hacking on whomever they want to spy on, basically. It facilitates it for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very unnerving, for political dissidents, is that you no longer own your cell phone. They could get inside of it and essentially own all your content inside of it. Hey, Richard, can you take the microphone for 2 minutes? I just want to pull up my notes.
Yeah, well, I had been concerned when I heard about how Intel was purchased by Israelis and relocated. Their headquarters was relocated to Israel. And I mean, the fact that all those Intel chips, they even advertise it as being in practically everything now, Intel inside. And I'm sure that those have back doors, which, if in the event of a world war or the U.S. finally decided to stop supporting Israel, I'm sure those back doors could be activated on many types of devices, which could render them virtually useless, or even work against any Americans, any British who chose to turn on Israel. I really think that there's probably some level of backdoor that is shared with these governments by the Israeli government, and then another level that is just for Israeli, Mossad access at the deepest level with these Intel chips. That's what I suspect anyway, Rollie. I don't know if you've ever thought about that, but I think, the whole Intel factory over there could be a good episode, doing research on it a bit more, and the key players,
Yeah, actually, they moved to Haifa, the Intel chip, and of course, our iPhones are definitely linked up with that, and a lot of our computer hardware, and also Microsoft itself, which is the mecca of security. Security is being relocated to Israel as well, and it's very unnerving because anything that you put on your software, like or in your hard drive, it's going to go to the scribes. It's going to go to the Pharisees. It's going to go to the Sanhedrin, and they got spreadsheets, and they're going to spread all your content over a unit 8200 computer and just harvest all of your data itself. And I don't know if you knew this. This is kind of a side note, Richard. Did you know Hulu itself, they'd never been able to prove that there's a back door inside of Hulu? That's never been forthcoming. So if Hulu itself has a back door, they have something that we can't detect, which is very disturbing as well. And they get a lot of their technology from Israel itself, China. They just give it to them, So it's like the system that you just mentioned, that we give $35 billion to Israel, and we have to buy their military-grade weapons. We just give them F-35s, and they refurbish them. And then they give the technology over to China, and then they never return the favor.
Yeah, well, it's clear Israel has the jump on being at the head of technology in the future, not just on the battlefield, not just in blackmailing key players, but just, controlling that technology, which could make all the difference in just an evolving multi-class world. You'll have the controllers, and you'll have the cogs, so to speak, and I mean, they want to breed, I think, a worker race in the future for these elites. So I'd say the ability to understand the technology is going to bridge the gap more and more, where it'll be just almost like two species of human in the future. Those who are just mesmerized by it, and those who understand how these things actually work. So I really think that our people, European people, need to stay on top of this technology as it evolves, and really innovate a lot of these sort of corporations, these factories processing a lot of these chips as well, and not leave it all to Israelis.
Yep, you're absolutely correct. I don't know if you've ever read Time Machine, this 1895 book by H.G. Wells. They made a movie about it in 2002. I know they made other series and film series and stuff like that. But in that book, the time travel in the end goes to the very distant future and discovers that there's two races of people that evolved apart from each other. You got the jungle people that are racially innocuous, just kind of like mixed, between brown, beige color. And then you got this alien race that lives underground. And when I say alien, I mean alien compared to what we know as humans today, that evolve in the caves itself, and they eat the people that are the jungle people. And they're more advanced civilization as well. So I definitely see that as predictive programming for the future, over 100 years later, itself, that the engineers could have foresaw that there would be two classes of people, the gray people, the non-playable characters, and the technocrats.
Yeah, and it seems like this era lay out a lot of the deciding factors, in how the future's going to run its course, for a lot of us and our descendants. We have to, this is kind of a last stand for, I think, a lot of free thinkers who are not currently financially elite, because that seems to be the initial way that they're breaking things down, is those who have the most wealth, are considered the upper class who deserve to benefit from all of these advancements, and in the future, only this small percentage who can afford the luxuries technology brings will be able to experience them anymore. It is quite at odds with the kind of communist, Marxist sort of attitude for world government in the U.S. A lot of the far left talking heads out there have right now, but really neither of those are a good solution, is the point,
And I've talked about the show before, like scientists have actually wondered about the hyper stimulation in our brains with the internet nowadays, because our brains really evolved to handle such thing as the internet. And like you just mentioned just a second ago, it's going to become two classes. What if they just jerk the chain? What if they unplug our cord and take it away from us? Because we know for a fact that Facebook was designed to socially engineer us. I don't think that it was just some dickhead wannabe frat boy at Harvard that came up with this system. There had to be state actors involved, even deep state actors involved with making Facebook. And it's definitely running that course of the technocrats and then everybody else. Who knows? With this 5G being rolled out, could it really cause population decrease? And as Richard mentioned earlier, just like the Palestinians in Israel, they need them to dig holes in the ground. They need them like Mexican labor, as we're accustomed to in the United States. I'm just trying to give you guys an analogy or like a point of reference to that, But definitely, humans are always going to be valuable to the elites, even if we go to AIs, because we will all have organs and blood to harvest. I don't know if you're back on mute.
No,
Yeah.
no, I was just absorbing that. I was just listening about where you were going to take that next.
But it definitely seems that there's no like resistance towards that whatsoever. And Republicans and Democrats are just in a horse race with each other to see who's going to go to the NWO first. I mean, there's nothing. Fox News is not going to stand up for the little man. Democrats hate us. They despise like working white people, to be honest. I mean, I'm a blue collar guy. I live a very frugal life. Don't really have too much. I got this high tech microphone that was given to me, and they think maybe that I'm just not. My life's not worth anything. Matter of fact, like I tell. I go to parties with my wife and I tell, what your husband does for a living. He's an MMA fighter. Deer in the headlights. You like to get hot and sweaty and fight? That's like barbaric. That's old world, It's definitely disconcerting to know that like professional people tend to have tend to be very condescending to working people. Have you ever experienced that before, Richard?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, Rollie. I mean, I've had a lot of different jobs. I've tried out a lot of businesses. I have a business at one point for 10 years, actually, self-employed with my partner. But I've had a lot of working class jobs at times, and sometimes, just simultaneously, at times where the economy is rough, where you're trying to improve conditions, in your investment, and you kind of have to work a couple jobs, here and there. Quite often, I'll notice just definitely the class differences. From working class people, if you're in a service industry position, you'll definitely get a lot better treatment. People who are white collar, so to speak, will often not appreciate or look down to you a bit, in the way they interact. I've noticed, a lot of other working class people who don't have much to spare will often be better tippers than people in, higher positions who are clearly wealthier. From what I hear, a lot of people tell me this who will do delivery work, for example. So that is a thing where people, once they develop a class system economically, they like to maintain it. And well, like I say, I think neither extreme is good. But what a lot of the far left gets sold on, thinking that you're going to have things equal for everyone. They don't realize that that's just to lure everyone in, and there'll still be an elite above them, and they'll start getting less and less as time goes on. Those excluded from the club, so to speak. But I don't know, I always wind up getting off on tangents about politics.
I got to use Steve Stevens, one of his favorite movies to reference. Stephen Douglas Whiteler always likes to mention Rollerball, the 1975 movie with James Caan. There was a quote in that movie that every rollerballer desires to be a gray suit executive. But if it tell you the truth, every gray suit executive wants to be a rollerballer. I don't know if you ever saw that movie before, Richard. Have you seen that movie? It gets into some like real deep subjects. Like, for example, in the future, there's no longer going to be a national anthem. There's just going to be a corporate anthem. And they get into this gray suit executive talking about there's no such thing as tribal warfare anymore. It's just the corporations. And we really see that with the corporations. They tend to be part of the same tribe. It's just ruthless businessmen that tend to be in the same gang. But they're just competing with each other economically a little bit. And it seems to be a family affair, if you will. They tend to hold the glue together.
Say, Rollie, did you say you were also taking callers if anyone did want to join in with us as well?
Yeah, you want to read out that call line for us real quick?
Yeah, if anyone wants
read out
to,
that call number for us if you could, sir.
Yeah, if anyone wants to add anything, ask any viewpoints of Rollie. We have a toll-free number for the U.S. I'm not sure overseas if that applies, but there's a list of exit codes on the contact page for the respective countries. But that call-in number is 855-492-6049. That's 855-492-6049. So you folks, are welcome to, bring up any topics, you're curious about, or something that you might want to share. These platforms are here for the people. The people's radio is the way we like to think of it, because everywhere else, everything's screened these days. You can't get on for 2 seconds and say something. Try it. Even Alex Jones, I'm sure. Try calling into him, and see how much you can get on air. Certainly these more corporate situations. I don't know if RT takes many callers these days, but yeah, Rollie, there aren't too many places where just anyone out there, could just voice their opinion and get it out there to people, But this is one of those places. Even if we disagree with the caller, we'll talk about the issue. We'll let them say their 2 cents, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You're correct. Come join the cult of Rollianity. And it seems that we got our first caller, Johnny with Liberty Light News. Johnny, how you doing tonight?
Gentlemen, how goes it?
How goes it with you?
Not too bad. Good stuff today, especially with Israel. That's crazy timing. I have a friend in Israel that I was just on the phone with today. He's actually Arabic, though. And just to touch upon the Israel and what the relationships are with foreign policies in America and China.
Is he Muslim or Jewish? Because you could be, you could be
he's Arabic.
an Israeli.
I don't know. I don't ask
You never
those
asked
kind of
him?
questions. I never asked,
Oh,
but
okay,
he
gotcha.
speaks 3 different languages. You know, he speaks English, Hebrew, and Arabic. So, but he's given me some of his own personal points of opinion, and actually, he was breaking down some stuff to me today about trade and business because that's our relationship of what we're doing. But he was telling me some crazy things when it came to Israel and how these big corporations that you were just talking about are having multinational control. And I was, because his English is not that good, so I was like, elaborate a little bit more. He said, well, you know, you got these big corporations, and I said, well, is it the oil fields? Is it oil money? He said, no, it's not oil. I said, okay, and, you know, he doesn't speak good English, but I didn't ask him the big businesses, but there's a lot over there. Just like America, it's the same businesses, just run by different people. And I said, so what do you take from that? And he said, man, it's just crazy because we have all this energy, we have all this technology. And he explained that how he lives in a village of Arabic people inside of Israel, so they get a hard time from both oppositions. You know, there's a lot of factions over there. But what it really boiled down to, what he was telling me, is that these corporations, these big companies, are controlling and suppressing the people over there. And if you just think about it in America's terms or in China's terms, we've always seen that with other countries controlling the population, controlling the workforce, controlling the technology, controlling the education system. And so what we got onto with the subject is the internet is informing people and connecting people such at a fast rate that humans don't need this public education bullcrap that they shove down our throats. They don't need none of this. You know, he learned his English by being on the internet and YouTube and this and that. So what I'm seeing from the story that he was telling me, and it was great that he told me this, especially with the topic that you bring up today, is they're really trying to control us. Israel, America, you could blame it on anybody. But what I really think it's boiling down to is just basic education. We're starting to know how they do business. We're starting to know how they operate. We're starting to communicate and become stronger and assimilate. And they're trying to shut that down in America when it comes to social media and stuff like that. But they've been doing that across everywhere else for a long time. We're just now experiencing that. And if they take that away from us as America, I feel sorry for any other country. So I guess my question to you is, what do you think about the old school businesses of IBM that have controlled some of this even since World War II, and all these companies are still around and they're still having their political influence? What do you think about that?
Israel definitely controls a lot of Gaza. I mean, it's an open air prison itself. They're able to cut off the water supplies itself and cut off lines of communication as well. They've shut down cell phone service, but the real problem is what I mentioned first, is water, especially since they say that Palestine is running out of fresh water, especially in Gaza. It's not even fit for a desert or a swamp creature to drink. I mean, it's so sludge, you know what I mean? Over in Gaza right now, a lot of the more hardliners like Lukovich is, you know, say let them starve, let them die. But the more liberals will just like give them water bottles, but that's not really solving the issue or helping them that much, you know, as well. I mean, you have to treat them like human beings and not like something to be used and abused. And with technology nowadays, it's going to get much, much worse. I mean, there's a dehumanizing process to technology. And people tend to feel, you know, when that car feeling where you're invincible when you're inside of your car. You know, people act different. They road rage. The same thing happens when they're online. They get rid of that passive aggressive veneer, and we know that. And so, like when the elites have their technology and then they're online, their whole stick is going to be very, very controlling, manipulative, and very hurtful to people in ways that the normal internet consumer or user would actually be able to do.
Yeah, it's true. That's what he did mention. He says that he survives on $200 a month, and that could pay for his water, gas, and everything. And of course, I've seen his place and everything. You know, we do Skype and all that. So, and he tells me these stories, and it's true. They don't even have a pot to piss in, and these people are very smart. Some of these people, just abroad, and it's really what we're seeing in a global technocracy is the Middle East was always been under, it's always been industrialized. It's always been fought over since the Civil War, the Cold War and stuff. And right now, I guess it even just brought it bigger to my mind today when I heard his story, that's what they're doing abroad everywhere. But they're really hitting these other places first. And 5G is going to be a big part of this. A lot of other things, policies abroad, all this. That's why I think we should get out of the United Nations immediately. I think everybody should get out of the United Nations. Everybody just needs to start being prosperous on their own. What's up with all these head figures in the United Nations? I think that's where a lot of this lays. But, you know, when it came to the oil industry part, whoever controls the industry controls the people around that area and the technology and how quick they learn and how quick the cities blow up when it comes to infrastructure being built. And so it's like, it's just really so surreal, because even since Desert Storm, Desert Shield, we've already known this. And Gaddafi, they've been trying to get on the gold standard. They've been trying to get out of the grips of globalists, and some people call them the Israelites or Zionists. They could be as well. There's a lot of factions in that, but it's really just a grip game of humanity and us being human-like. Instead, they want to control our interactions. They want to control our commerce. They want to control our education. I think we're coming to this point where the internet, there's no turning back unless they turn this thing off. And they're scared right now.
Let's go back to my earlier topic. I don't know if you were listening when we were talking about the NSO group itself, Johnny. It's espionage software. It's called Pegasus, and it could actually steal and breach your personal data without breaking a twig or disturbing a blade of grass itself. You know, every time that you have an ISO or iOS security update, it's a way to try to neutralize this particular software itself. It's like the factory reset. And when they give you those updates, you don't even know that it's resetting or updating itself. They call it updating, I should say. But it actually uses a Trojan relay system, and it's like a perfect model for spycraft. Have you ever heard of Pegasus?
Oh, yeah. There's a few softwares. If I'm not mistaken, Prism rolled out with that software as part of the NSA program. I have to double check, but Prism is a big one that uses that software to spy on us. Yeah. There's even entities that use that software in particular, I believe. Let me see.
Yeah, that was what Edward Snowden was talking about. He was also talking about XKeyscore and Barney system. But that's a big one, is Prism himself. And if you look at that pyramid, you know, with the rainbow stick coming out of it, that's really the best visual representation that comes to mind when you think of a prism, you know, for what they have. And I don't know if they're able to do what they say as far as collect every single data, you know, metadata in the world. They do collect a lot. But I think it's a way to scare us in a certain way, because people have been so cowed by the notion of Prism itself. And I know that for a fact that they want to know whether we pee standing up or sitting down itself. They want to know every aspect of his life, but there's a lot of people in the world. Can they really collect all that data itself?
Yeah, they actually can. I worked for companies that I know this for a fact. I used to do metadata and UReach. They have mass data farmers, big warehouses. Even back in the 60s and 70s, these warehouses were so big, and they just collect metadata when it came to voice recognition or point A to point B, number to number. But even since then, I've had some friends that I worked with that were, no joke, tier 5 techs, one of the best techs ever. Get employee of the year. He's done great things. I won't name off the company that we used to work for, but it was in Vancouver, Washington. I could say that much. And what it came down to is we were going away from the command prompt code that everybody sees on the movies, like you're hacking a computer kind of looking deal. That's command prompt, and you get into these systems, and you just figure out what's wrong or to toggle this or that. What happened since then, and this is why a lot of people are getting laid off even in the technical field, is everything has become GUI interface, touch and click, pretty much like the internet. You touch something, it's called GUI interface. Instead of knowing a bunch of code, which is why we got paid to know some of this, is to know some code. That's why you got paid to know that. Now anybody could do it. And so they're laying off these technicians even. Some of them are some of the best technicians I've ever met. And they're laying them off. And I'm like, you guys laid them off 3 years before he retires. And this guy has been nothing but loyal. And he even had to defeat cancer. I won't name off the gentleman, but if he's listening, he knows who I'm talking about. But it's just a shame because who knows, maybe the Israels or just some Chinese people sooner or later are going to be the surveillance of the technocracy. We don't need to control everybody. We just need to control people that oversight the software and programs that you're using. And 5G will be the mesh network of all that, is what they're trying to do, is what I see.
Back in January 2006, there was a lobbyist for the NSA. A lot of people don't know that, realize that they actually have lobby groups named David Winberg. And he wrote a 2-page paper making an argument of why they're moving the mega computer centers over at Camp Williams. And you know what he said, Johnny? He said the reason we're bringing these to Utah is not only that the people of Utah have cheap, electricity to use, but they're also very patriotic. They don't question.
Yes.
Essentially, was what he meant. They're not going to question like unhealthy this is. They're not going to protest. They're not going to make a must. They're just reactionary Republicans.
I do see that, and they're rolling that everywhere out. Everywhere, because they have to. Even my friend was telling me this when he was talking about his story today. He said, I have business relationships here as well and there. What it comes down to is communication. And of course he speaks 3 languages. I'm bilingual. I'm Spanish myself. But it's true. If they control the language, if they could control the programming, then they could control that population. They're rolling it out in America. They're rolling it out in China. We see that already. Israel, other places. Russia, I don't know. They're kind of being hesitant, but I know they're on top of all this. They got their eye peeled, that's for sure. Russia is no slouch when it comes to knowing what's going on. But I don't think they're going to take the pill as much as America, China, or other these places. And some of these places have been in dispute forever, so it's a timing thing for them of how quick can they roll this out while suppressing us from not rebelling. But maybe they do want us to rebel in America. Sometimes it feels like that,
Hey, Johnny.
Yes,
Johnny.
sir.
Hi. Richard. Hey, glad to hear you calling in tonight here.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, the listeners probably aren't aware, but we just happened to finally get in touch on Facebook. All this time I've been hearing you contributing at the station here, but we hadn't actually really interacted on there, so it was kind of...
No, we hadn't exchanged information yet. Yeah, I think I found you through one of the friends, social friends, yeah.
I am curious, though. I know you don't want to mention the name of the company you used to work for, but since this show is a bit about cyber spying, cyber technology, surveillance, I mean, I'm sure Rollie would like to hear, more of your opinion, your take on a lot of these things. To start with, I'm curious if you caught the part earlier when I was talking about Intel moving to Israel, the whole theory of the different tier levels of backdoors in the Intel chips. I don't know. Would you suspect that could be
I
the
did
case
catch
as well?
that. Yeah, well, you guys were bringing up Liberty earlier, the U.S. battleship, Liberty, and it's weird because we've known that America has been giving some of our technology, even since the Cold War era with the 2 Russian spies when they took over some of our nuclear capabilities to develop a nuclear bomb. America's education, its programming, its people, its everything, that is what has made humanity prosper, really. And when it came to Israel, when you brought up that point, Liberty, when you brought up that, was so interesting because the story and the backstory of Liberty in general was there was a psyops and it was an accident, and Israel accidentally bombed and shot Liberty, and it almost sank and drowned, and a lot of people died in casualties. The weird part that I found about that and what you were talking about in today's episode was a lot of people need to remember this. Liberty was sold to the Israelis for only $6 million. America was asking for about 14, 16 million. They settled on 6. Israel scrapped it for an extra $100,000, but that's not the point. The point was we had sensitive technology on that ship, and we just handed it over like, oh, we're not going to sell you the technology, but if you bomb us or hit us, we could sell it back to you. And so when it comes to the Pentagon and all this, we see those back deals. There's a lot of generals. I believe Rosemary was talking about a lot of these generals on Monday's show, and she's very right. There's a lot of stuff that's happened, especially during Lyndon B. Johnson's time, which was a big, crazy story of just Lyndon B. Johnson. But it's very true because we've been slowly leaking this information to Israel. China we've been selling it. I guess the politicians really have been selling it to China. But to answer your question, I think the million-dollar question is why are we even giving these countries our technology? And I think it is because they want to teach everybody how to use this technology because of the culture, the dialect is if they can have those people control them, then they won't resist the pill. They won't resist the program. And I think Rollie Quaid just made a perfect point about the military base and just people taking orders. And we saw this roll out in the Nazi era through IBM, really. That's the funny part. And then now we're seeing the 2.0 version of it. And it's coming fast and it's coming quick, and then we're getting shadow banned, and we're trying to keep in contact. We're trying to keep all this lined up historically. But I guess 2020 is going to be where we're going to see globalism and technocracy head. It's sad. There's a lot of fractions of that.
There's a couple points of contention I got with that statement.
All right.
I
was also curious what else you had to ask.
Statement.
Rollie, I was also curious what other questions you had to ask about Johnny's work.
Yeah, like I definitely agree with you. If you're referring to like military men, usually just generally don't ask questions, kind of like Bat Guano in the movie Dr. Strangelove. I agree with you, but there's a very difference, with us and like National Socialism in this country. They were fighting a war against essentially the entire world on all borders, and they did take orders, itself. And I do have a lot of questions about the official story about the Holocaust as well, and the role with IBM with the concentration camps or the labor camps. From my understanding, IBM did not build the concentration camps. They were there to collect data, like to keep up with like who's what, when, where. What they rolled out with. Yeah, but you said Monday that they built the concentration camps.
No, they didn't build it. They built the technology to document them. The timestamp cards is what it was. That's what I with the numbers.
That's more accurate than I just wanted to just clarify. Yep, that's more accurate. Yes, sir. Yep.
Yeah. No, IBM didn't build
Johnny,
the concentration camps. No. Go ahead. Yeah.
Johnny, have you heard about Jedi? No, I'm not talking about Star Wars. Have you heard of Pentagon Jedi?
I haven't. You stumped me on that one.
It's the Joint Enterprise Defense Initiative Project. It's up for bid now. Like a bunch of companies want to get a hold of it, and it's going to be Israel getting a hold of it. Have you heard anything about it, Richard? Richard's not there.
Sometimes
It's
it takes me a
basically,
minute sometimes it takes me a second to unmute there when I'm not ready, Rollie. That's all. Sorry. But no, I've heard the term referenced. I didn't hear it described in too much detail. But yeah, a lot of these programs, they'll try to have catchy terms from popular culture even, or sci-fi culture. Jedi, I'm not surprised that one was used. But no, please, I was curious because I only heard vague references in the past.
we're going to have to study up on this, gentlemen, because from what I understand, the DoD made like a cloud, like a commercial cloud-based system, and it's for they need quicker response time for their readiness with the military, and the pipeline between the Department of Defense and the CIA is up for grabs and can be privatized. And it seems like Israel's going to get into it, with the AWS, which is like the Amazon. I forgot the W and the S, but it tends to think. I tend to think like this is, and Christopher Berlin has actually talked about this with like P-Tech and the backdoors and software and stuff like that. I think that this is going to be a systemic problem itself, that if Israel gets a hold of the clouds, itself, there's going to be consequences to that, because like how much stuff do you have backed up on the cloud, guys?
I personally don't use it. I opt out for just particular reasons.
Well, I'm tired of
Just for that exact reason.
I'm tired of how much software wants it to be a yearly subscription where you can't just have a flat fee and own software anymore. I heard a really ridiculous example recently, though. This was regarding Photoshop, I believe. They want to. Well, they were sending out letters. Any people who had a version a certain amount of years old before they went on the yearly subscription, saying you no longer have the rights to that license. They bought it flat out at the time. That was before this subscription thing was rolled out. But no, suddenly now they expect them to just stop using it, discard their copies. And that just infuriates me. I think we need to do away with this, get back to people owning their software and owning their files. I don't like the cloud system. It's going to get tied up with the social credit system. That's what I'm afraid.
Yeah, absolutely. We've covered that before, the nosedive that we're going to take soon, where your neighbors could judge you, be the judge, jury, and execution, and actually give you a rating which determines your credit score and determines like how well you get transfer. So you got to make sure that everybody in the world likes you. That's impossible. I got the manners of a truck driver. People tend to not like Rollie Quaid. It's amazing though, with the AWS, and it's the Amazon Web Service that I couldn't flesh out and bring out in my mind earlier, that it's going to be a cloud service, with the Ford Tech Industries itself. And it's just going to be a pipeline for even the Soviet Russians and the Chinese to harvest our data as well. And Israel's the little instigator involved in this situation with the trade wars, which are really tech wars. And America is getting the raw deal. We can't be dual citizens. We have no other nation of origin. Johnny could go back to Mexico and kind of merge with the background. You know what I mean? But I'm working on my tan, buddy. I could dye my hair black.
Right. It's crazy down there, you say.
What's the worst place in Mexico right now, Johnny?
Oh man, it's everywhere. I think I posted up a video of Juarez, Mexico, the capital, not right here on the border because it's a state too, but we're seeing an influx of people from South Africa and Africa coming into Mexico, and they're at the consulate right here in Juarez, Mexico, Chihuahua.
Yeah, Johnny, that's
really weird.
That was
We're
related.
seeing that.
Was part of what you're relaying from that article that I sent you?
Yes, that as well. Yeah, I had shared that as well. Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, you did share that as well.
Yeah, because I thought of you,
I got that
and I also think a lot of people would be surprised. It's not just people from Mexico and Central America at our southern border here, but Africans in large numbers. A lot of people would not be aware of that, or it's something that certainly would let them see things in a new light.
Be a factor.
And just how engineered all of this is, how deliberate, and I mean, they're not just taking people to neighboring countries because of genuine difficult living conditions. It's just ridiculous. There are commercials to come to America for the American dream. We'll set you up, from all of these NGOs. But you being also from Texas, living there near the border as well, I wanted to share that article
right on
with
the border,
you.
Yeah.
Would you be interested in chatting about it more? I mean, like maybe tomorrow, if you want to chat on my show. I wanted to cover that story about the African immigrants, and you being from Texas, would you want to talk more about the border situation, what you've seen firsthand?
What time would that be?
Let's see, that would be 8 Eastern. My show is like 8 to 10.
We could do that. That sounds great.
Okay.
Good, most
All right.
definitely.
All right, well, I'll see you here tomorrow then for that topic. That sounds
great.
Yeah,
so we'll get off that topic right now.
But I am curious.
To Rollie Quaid's topic.
Well, yeah. I mean, your knowledge of cybersecurity. I mean, from what you learned for the kind of work you used to do. I mean, what could you tell us about what you've learned in the industry of it?
Okay, well, it's not really hard stuff. It's just networking, CCNA, Cisco Certification, Network Administration, security. When it came to security, it was simple stuff: firewalls, servers. When I worked in Vancouver, Washington, for the metadata company that I was speaking about, it was a tier 2 tech position, so it wasn't too crazy technical, but you had to have experience, obviously. But it was entailing setting up these UREACH systems. And the UREACH system is if you call, say, your credit card company or your food stamp card, if you're getting low times or you got unemployment, and you go through the network buttons, press 1 for this, press 3 for that. So that was one of my title shifts. It was very easy. And they started making that GUI interface, so it was touch and command instead of command prompt. So you didn't have to type out all these commands. But the ones that were technical was POTS, plain old telephone service is what it's called. And that's just tip to ring technology. So say a customer calls in and you get a ticket. The customer says, hey, I have the ticket and I can't receive calls or I can't access my voicemail. Something's wrong. So they call us and we get a ticket, and we go through that and start testing a few things, calling on a different number, seeing what happened. Sometimes you'd have to call the customer and say, well, I think we fixed your problem, but did we? And sometimes they'd have to elaborate because we have an assistant that would take the notes for the trouble ticket. So, sometimes there were some things that were just simple fixes, but that was just metadata. And what I did in the oil fields, after all that happened, I moved to Texas from Washington State. I started getting into the oil fields, and I got a job. And I won't name that out. The oil fields, I had 3 jobs over there, always to have a better pay. But what we worked on was the technology and the networking system to send all the data from the oil rig into the Houston server hub tandems. And what that did is if a mud driller or a mud logger was digging a certain amount of feet at a certain pressure, we had to have that set up on its own system off of the regular VSAT WiMAX system. It was its own system because that went straight to Houston. So there was 2 systems that we were working on, as well as setting up cell phone boosters and everything else that they ever asked for. But it was mostly just the oil rig aspect of having a secure line. They were really strict about oil rig moves when you're moving a rig from point A to point B, that you have to have communication up immediately. Once there's power up, I already had to have all my equipment laid out. I had to have it already tested. I obviously had a generator, so I had power before they had power. And my job was to make sure everything was good. I was just a technician on hand that knew everything and probably wanted them to fix more than I should have, like their phones and problems on their printers and computers. That wasn't my job title shit, but I could easily do that, But when you're getting paid the big bucks, you have to call your boss and say, hey, this guy wants to spend an extra few thousand to waste an hour or 2 of my time. Is that okay? And if we had enough time in my schedule, then so be it. So it was a fast-paced job, and that was a good experience in general.
Well, did some of the clients require you to have certain type of security clearance? You and the others.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, we had a bunch of training.
You had to be screened and.
Man.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, we had to pass a national background check, a terrorist FBI check, because you blow up one of these oil wells. That's a national terror act. So we had to pass a national terror act. We had obviously so much OSHA training, just ridiculous. And then, I had to climb up on top of the rigs to set some of these WiMAXs. So I had my climb certification. And then they had a very strict security system. And some of these oil wells that hadn't been opened, but they were, it's called, they call them man camps is what they call them, but they're really just seismic testing for these oil wells. But sometimes I would go over to these sites that didn't have an oil rig, even though I worked on the oil rigs, but they would have a contract for me to set up some equipment, routers, modem servers. 5G was rolling out during this time. So some of these people were getting 5G boxes. But when I came to an oil well in particular, I could now name this oil well, but it's called the Pearl. It's out there in Odessa, Midland, Texas, in between a really big, another oil field down in Big Springs. But this particular oil well, there was a lot of security. You had fences, check marks, safety man, company man. You had to go through all this rigorous stuff, and they had to call you in there before you even got in there. So it was almost like a military checkpoint. Like they already had you on the list. They had a check-in booth with a security guard. All of these big places had one of those. So, and yeah, it was really crazy because we talk about infrastructure and technology. That's what really everybody's fighting about is the control. And if we have a comfortable life and we could make money online and we have all the energy and food, then they don't like that, the globalists, because we're going to outbreed them, but they've been controlling us for a long time. So yeah, we're at an informational war as well as physical resources. Everybody's trying to switch away from petro, but it's really hard because everybody's still fighting over these pipelines. And we're seeing that in Israel, the Middle East, Texas, and all these places. I remember they were saying, oh, America only has this much oil. But I already knew we had way more than that. Come to find out 3 years later, they talked about the Pearl District, and there was some 4.3 trillion barrels, more than Saudi Arabia. So America's really, I'm seeing, when it comes to having some experience in the oil fields of that and just being geopolitically aware of what's going on, I've seen that they're really suppressing those cultures, those people. And it's really sad because the stories that I hear, one from my friend today, it was just really crazy. It just made me think about America can be imperialistic at times, even though I'm an independent constitutionalist. It's just, who are the good people that are going to stand up and fight, And we could all point fingers at each other, but if we don't start coming together and bumping elbows, we might start raising arms and killing each other over stupid stuff that the government has been lying to us all about. It's all about resources. And if they could make you feel like there's not enough oil and not enough money, not enough food, and they control you and suppress you through digital communications, then that might be the goal. That might be exactly their agenda.
Yeah,
You
you're
still there?
absolutely correct. Yeah. It's
Okay.
becoming more than just resources and soil. It's becoming the tech world as well, in cyberspace, which is a whole different terrain. But definitely oil, Texas tea is what fueling the economy right here in the United States. And they could cut off that supply line, definitely. I think they tend to keep us overfed and overprivileged to a certain degree while keeping us overworked. They're keeping their lambs very fat so they could go to their corporate job every day. I like to go to the aquariums. We don't have SeaWorld over here in Minneapolis. We got it's called Sea Life. And I like to go there and look in the tanks. There's the sea turtle, the shark, the tuna, and they're all just floating around, coexisting in this artificial aquarium.
Synthetic environment. Yeah.
Synthetic environment.
Yeah.
And I like to sit there and, they got the escalator thing where it's like flat and it's not really an escalator. So like at the airport where you don't have to walk, it just moves for you. I'm just sitting there like thinking that if they didn't feed these guys, they would be tearing each other apart. The turtle would be chewing on the fin of the shark.
Oh, yeah.
The shark would definitely tear into a couple dolphins itself, and that seems to be what America is like in a nutshell. If I could use some sort of analogy, that we're like a bunch of people that coexist with each other as long as we're fed, as long as our household is good, but our skin becomes our uniform when it comes to resources as well. People tend to be very tribalistic when they get that offset because you actually use different parts of your brain when you're full than when you're hungry. Isn't that right, Johnny?
Flight or flight is what they call it, I believe. Yeah, effect.
And plus, like
they use that against us.
They use fight and flight.
It's either survival mode or not. Yeah.
The validation system that they got on Facebook, that's fight or flight. And it's been oversensitized. So what's going to happen when they shut down the tube itself? What's going to happen? Are we going to be more hyperbolic than we would be before if they shut down the pipeline of resources and food?
Yeah, it almost makes you wonder what will happen when the circus and bread is taken away. Are we all going to riot? And it almost seems like they want that. They get these ideas in people's heads, left versus right, Democrat, blue, or Republican, black versus white. It's just ridiculous. Yeah.
They make it seem like that stuff actually matters in the media, that people are already fighting on the streets, tearing each other apart. Seems that the Democrats and Republicans in Congress and in politics itself are already ripping each other apart. There's no such thing as a decorum. Donald Trump killed it. This era
well,
that
that's
we're
what I'm
in
saying.
now.
I don't watch TV, but that's how they're really programming people. Just for example, Game of Thrones just ended, I guess. I've never watched one damn episode. But everybody talks about it on social media, and it's like, oh, they killed this village, they killed these people, or some of these other shows and movies that everybody watches. I don't even know what they watch, but that's the example I have off the top of my head. They make it seem like that's what's going to happen. If doomsday happens or we go back into the ancient times, it's going to be tribalistic, and humans are pretty tribalistic, and they do play that off of us because we are tribalistic, unfortunately. We need to break out of that paradigm. But what happens if the power does turn off? The show and the TV's off. Are people going to start acting like that and being cultures and hate and kill just over resources? Maybe that's what the elites want. Maybe that's what they're doing right now, programming us in this digital era. Wait until RV comes out, or VR comes out, which it already is, but like more technical with sensors in the room and all the feeling. People are going to be in a trance, and they're not going to know what's real and what's not here soon. And you see these people now legislating for mushrooms. I'm not against it, but I don't think with the society that we have nowadays, LA and some of these places in Denver, some of these people have mental illnesses, health issues. And when we're going into this new phase of humanity, people are going to be really shell-shocked. And I do see some of these truthers out here that are shell-shocked and don't know if we live on a round sphere or we live on a flat plane, you know. Some people believe in the flat earth, you know. It's like, oh man, if we're starting to talk about that, you know, the rabbit hole only gets deeper on that one. They're really doing that. They're really giving us a doozy.
Yep, you're absolutely correct. You know, psilocybin is definitely, I think that there's positive influences on taking it. There's a couple of like doors that I could wish I could break down and to break on to the other side about a lot of theories that I've been thinking about that's been stewing in my mind for a while. But it does seem that we're in a pseudo world, and you don't need mushrooms for that, do you? It seems to be a synthetic reality, almost augmented reality, and it's caused by the media itself, a false paradigm. And we need to shift beyond that and really see the world and take it for what it is, like a straight edge punk. You know, have you ever heard of that straight edge movement? I don't know if that's big outside of North Carolina, but it's a movement that I grew up when I was a kid. It was the teenagers that decided, you know, we're not going to smoke cigarettes or drink alcohol, do drugs. We're going to take life at face value and accept the world the way it is. And we're going to destroy our television. So I went from like the Bible Belt as a kid, right? Deep into it, you know, like we got like a bunch of VHSs and we rewatched them over and over again. So we didn't have cable. We had dial-up internet. I think everybody really did in the 90s and the 2000s, you know. So yeah, it's amazing how like technology's evolved. But that's another talk for another day. But it's amazing that people that are liberal yuppies that are advocating for PC culture and disarmament, and they're pawns for the New World Order, and they don't even realize it, because when shit hits the fan, and worst case scenario, when we're eating each other like the Night of the Living Dead, they're going to be hunted down for white meat because they have no real world experiences. They don't know how to make a bonfire. They don't know how to make a camp.
What happened to all those liberals? Yeah, what happened to all those liberals that were up against Occupy Wall Street? Where are all those liberals that were protesting the figureheads and the CEOs of Occupy Wall Street? It's like those liberals turned into the pawns for the head figures. It's weird because even the liberal movement got hijacked. I thought the liberals were a little crazy, but I thought they had some good points, you know, like Occupy Wall Street. I was like, yeah, you should hold some of these guys accountable. Now it's like, oh no, not just Donald Trump that's destroying it. It's all Donald Trump's fault. It's like, well, it could be, but it's a lot of companies before this. And I feel like the liberals used to be more educated, and now it's like they went off the far end. And hopefully we could bring them back, but it's just strange times because they already knew all this government stuff, and then now they just think it's just one man rules everything, Donald Trump. Well, we've already known it wasn't one man. We were protesting against the whole New World Order and the UN and everything against that. So it's just really weird because they do keep us in this synthetic world that you were talking about with the media, keeping us fat and fed. We don't go outside. We don't get enough sunlight. We don't farm our own food. We eat junk. All of it's synthetic already. I totally agree with it.
Yeah, so in 2010, there was this Occupy Wall Street where nobody really had a job. You know, everybody was displaced to a large degree, it seemed like. And people had nothing better to do than go to their respected city capitals and stand outside all day and make a tent and protest. Nobody really cared about the issues itself. It just got to the base point of we want to eat and we want jobs. There was no gender issues. There was no such thing as LGBT.
Yeah.
There was
they turned it into a big old circus.
Right. And it became my community is the LGBTQRX community, and everybody else is an outsider. And now in 2019, we got blacks that actually support segregation. They don't want to be in the same dorm rooms as white people because they're triggered by white people. You know what I mean? They can't stand the sight of them. So, like, black people are scared of white people now in 2019. So that's another offset. I know
that,
for a fact.
Rollie, is that the message that some of Farrakhan's followers are getting? Does he have that sort of level of just anti-white triggering sort of sentiment in his message? I know he speaks out about a lot of Jewish power, a lot, and Facebook I know was calling out, singling out his account among some of those others recently.
Yeah, so in 2012, the Nation of Islam officially merged with Scientology. And it turned out Farrakhan had been a Scientologist for a number of years, and they actually give diacritics free to particular people of Nation of Islam. And we know that Scientology itself is a controlled brainwash system. And Farrakhan was questioned, like, you've claimed that white people are the devil in the past. Blonde hair, blue eyes, And he made the case in point, well, if I'm sick and I need a doctor, I don't care if they're black, blue, whatever, they are. I'm going to get the best professional help I need. And he was referring to getting help from Scientologists.
Oh, wow.
These mind butchers. So Farrakhan's somebody that I've never trusted, full stop, but some things that he said that I actually find myself agreeing with. He just got recently deplatformed, and the media always made him a spectacle, almost a boogeyman as well, for anti-Semitic tropes and taken deeply out of context. And I know that he said some harsh things about white people in the past, but he's relatively harmless compared to the Lukoviches, in my opinion, and the AIPAC people. He tends to be like a lower tier, in my opinion, to worry about. Not really a big focus, in my opinion. The Nation of Islam tends to be a small bunch as well, and they cross-pollinate a little bit and say things are valuable too. I don't like the idea that white people are devils. They've kind of backtracked a little bit on that. I know when Elijah Muhammad was alive, he would tell his followers that there's a spacecraft coming, and then when he died, Farrakhan advocated to the point of that Elijah Muhammad is actually driving the mothership now, and he's going to use laser beams and zap all the white people. He said it live on air, in the 90s. So there's a brainwashed aspect to the Nation of Islam, and there's always been like a ufology in Nation of Islam too that really coincides, in my opinion, because I think Elijah Muhammad read a lot of science fiction back in the 1920s and 30s when he was alive, and brought that into his movement, in the 50s when the height of like Nation of Islam.
Wow.
And yeah, it's absolutely amazing. It goes undetected. It might be a way to brainwash people, like the idea that there's like Xenu out there and it's like shocking, but you're so deep in the movement that you don't really care, but in a way it retards you as well. But that's just my 2 cents on the issue. What were we going to say, Richard?
Oh, no, I wasn't. I was going to ask Johnny if he's heard anything or has an impression of Farrakhan or related to the influence of his followers.
Well, he is pretty radical to some people's extent, but when it comes to just general talks about are we going to start suppressing some of these people, I totally disagree. I could care less what Ben Shapiro says. I could care less what Farrakhan says. I could care less what Alex Jones says. And it's just really a tactic for anybody in control to control people. We talk about socialism. This is socialism. And where is this coming from? It's coming from these technocratic entities, Facebook, Google, it's almost like, I know Farrakhan is an old school figure, and he's been a part of this for a while. And I'm not saying maybe he's a shield. He might believe everything he says. But in general, it's like they threw in this mix of people, Farrakhan on the topic we're talking about. But it's just another reason to slowly take away your freedom. So, some people call him anti-Semitic. I don't really see him anti-Semitic. I know he said bad things about Jews, but I don't. Just like calling somebody a racist, you could disagree with somebody, but it doesn't mean that person is racist. And we're coming to this hyper-extensive, volatile area of politics, and I'm offended, and it's a circus now. It's like, whatever happened to just talking? Whatever just happened to having an open platform, open dialect? Now, media makes everything crazy. You got these big global interest companies taking over that really over succeeds the Constitution itself. And we're having an uphill battle when it comes to the old school money, these new technocrats, the vision of what people can and cannot say by what they're going to be suppressed about, and policy changes. And a lot of policy changes are about to happen. So I think they're getting ready for all this. And Farrakhan was just a smoke man, a straw man, a smoke screen, just like Alex Jones. So we got to be really careful about everybody.
I wouldn't take too lightly, though, Rollie's information about his past. I mean, Rollie, that organization has had a lot of cult like members, influential people who have come through its ranks prior. Isn't that right? What you were mentioning about his...
Muhammad Ali is probably the most prominent figure. Also Malcolm X, but of course he's part of the clergy.
And
involved.
Once again,
Snoop
to
Dogg.
clarify, we're talking about what organization?
Nation of Islam.
Oh, no. I was also, though, you said in 2010 regarding Farrakhan's past, you had cited another affiliation. Right?
Yeah, they're affiliated with each other now. That most of the members of Nation of Islam actually use Dianetics system as well. I got a friend who's a member of the Nation of Islam, and he told me in 2012 he actually got Dianetics done for free for him. And it's usually a $1 million process, but I think that they figure a lot of the members of Nation of Islam don't have money. So they're giving it to him for free, something that you'd have to be ultra rich to get. And he said that he went through the whole process and it triggered something that he forgot about. And it was one of his friends got raped as a kid by a janitor in a school, and he suppressed that memory.
The Church of Scientology's evolved a lot. At first, it was just the Dianetics book. It's not completely clear if he had all this foreseen way back when, but it was like a scientific spirituality. Isn't that one way to put its origin in a concise description?
Yeah, actually, a lot of people don't know this, but L. Ron Hubbard was deep involved with MK Ultra itself. He was affiliated with Aleister Crowley, one of his members, and he's also affiliated with Jack Parsons. He actually stole Jack Parsons' girlfriend away from him, and that's the rocket man that designed the Pentagon itself. And he was a member of the OSS, and he was basically him and a bunch of renegade members of the OSS that were outcasted, that really didn't join the CIA. Maybe some of them did. What do I know? About that. But it's basically Scientology initially started as a cover for OSS for continuing. And they actually had a naval ship that they went around, Sea Org, and went to very different countries, studying, the science of the mind, cognitive science, and try to unlock secrets inside of your mind itself, and ultimately that results in mind control as well when you're so scientifically invested in trying to figure out the dark matter inside of our brain as well and how to control man. And he was a captain of his own ship. He may never been a captain on the Navy, but he was definitely the captain on that particular ship that he had.
Right. And earlier I was also just, when you thought I meant Nation of Islam, I was referring to Church of Scientology, as far as a lot of people coming through its ranks who went on to very influential and relatively cult-like positions in a lot of fields. I mean, but certainly, they'll get a lot of helping hands once they've been affiliated with Church of Scientology. Almost like a mafia, isn't it?
Yeah, actually, Leah Remini is probably like the most famous squirrel, and that's a defect. Somebody who defected from Scientology. That's her code name. She has her own special on the network and exposing Scientology, but I think she's actually a spokesperson for that under the veil, because she's giving out a lot of disinformation about Scientology itself. She tends to think that Dave Miscavige and Tom Cruise basically can control Scientology, and they're very homophobic. Well, they must have they had like a rule where they didn't allow homosexuals, but they must have overturned that rule, Tom and Johnny. Not our Johnny. I'm talking about John Travolta.
Right.
And
go ahead.
So they do have prominent members in there. The only problem, though, is they wanted to get that tax exempt status back in the 80s, and Leah Remini never mentions like exactly how Scientology overcame that. And what happened was that a bunch of members of the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, and a bunch of other agencies decided that you could get that exempt status if you let us have a couple representatives on your board. And Leah Remini never mentions that on her show whatsoever. She tends to think that David Miscavige just runs it like a dictator, all by himself, just running it all. Everybody's on a string and he's pulling it, knows everything, inside the organization. And there's no outside forces in Scientology itself. That's another red flag that I have with Leah Remini. It seems to be, like I've mentioned, it's like, I'm going to school you in on how bad this thing is and that thing is, but you don't know that you're being indoctrinated. And there's going to be a lot more people converting to Scientology because of Leah Remini itself, in my opinion. They're going to reach people that they normally wouldn't be able to reach.
Don't you have to pay into that too? I heard it's like a level system program. This is what I've been researching on. I'm like, what the hell?
Yeah, you got
it's a pyramid program scheme.
Yeah, so like you mentioned earlier, we were talking about like Occupy Wall Street movement, which was organized by like the Anonymous group, right? Did you know that the Anonymous group had like a war going on with the Church of Scientology as well, Johnny?
I am unaware of that. I know there's a lot of white hats out there, and there's a lot of news, but Scientology has been on the radar for some of these people, yeah. I didn't know that, though.
That was the first time.
I know they're taking on a lot of fronts. I know they are.
Hold on, Johnny. Like, that was the first time that the hacker group Anonymous decided, let's get beyond the computer screen and actually go out there and protest and actually put the V for Vendetta masks on and be right outside. A lot of the members thought, no, we should do all our activists fly by night, And it became, from that, Occupied Wall Street. So all these people that you wonder about, like where they went, they got a little bit too complacent with the computers, I think, as well. And I guess in another way, we're not being steered like we were in 2010 to want to go out. I think at a flip of a switch, the agencies could come in and say we're anonymous and actually get people to want to go out and occupy Wall Street again, because there's no hierarchy. There's no official order. They say that they don't want to be penalized by RICO if they, be a gang, and I understand that as well.
I see that.
Yep. But, and matter of fact, IBM is actually boasting that they've actually neutralized Anonymous as well. That's another thing I was going to talk about my guest tonight. Unfortunately, no call, no show. But did you hear anything about I think it's called the X Factor. I'm diving through my notes now. They're actually saying that in 2015 there was 35 reported anonymous attacks. Now they're down to 2. So we've triumphed on the group.
Well, there's a lot of cyber attacks going on. There's thousands going on right around us. They even have websites to track all this. But an anonymous case in particular, there's just a bunch of white hats, is my understanding. I've met maybe 1 or 2 that I think of, but nobody really tells themselves that they're a white hat neither. It's kind of like an unspoken shaman thing of sorts, like, you have these little group of friends that you hang out with and you do some of this and that, but you're really not supposed to talk about it. But
it's like
I
the
didn't
rules
know
of Fight
anything
Club.
about that.
Rule number 1, don't talk about it. Rule number 2.
Yeah, pretty much.
Don't talk about it. Yeah, that's exactly how it is. And that they don't want to breach their safety net. They don't want to breach, getting in trouble and having agents inside of their order. But the problem, though, is they were very involved with the Arab Spring, this idea of going to the streets and democratizing, the Middle East, which was a total farce. We don't see Jeffersonian democracy sprouting up in Syria right now, do we? All over the Middle East. No, we're not getting democracies, are we? And it's very connected between the Arab Spring and Occupy Wall Street movement. The same forces, funded both of them. The Occupy was George Soros. He was bankrolling it. He was bankrolling the Arab Spring as well. And Julian Assange was very involved, with both itself. There would be no Arab Spring if it wasn't for WikiLeaks.
Yeah, with the cables releasing and all that. Yeah.
So that's what the timing was. 2010. That's when the colossal murder, or I am slaughtering this. I cannot believe it. But the links, the Lady Gaga links, that Manning handed over to WikiLeaks, happened. And collateral murder. That's what I was thinking of. I'm sorry. I had a brain fart. So, like, all that was during the same time period as well. The Arab Spring, Occupy Wall Street, and WikiLeaks. And Julian Assange, there's always a reason for the media to talk about Julian Assange. Now they're talking about, like, Sweden right now wants him. You can't have him, America. So this is going to be his trial is going to be like a long process. I thought they were just going to take him to Alexandria, Virginia.
Yeah, he's still in the UK right now. He's not even in America's custody. He's not even in America's custody right now.
Johnny, he actually cannot be a traitor to America because he's not only an American citizen, he's never been an American citizen, but he's never even been to the United States.
Nope. He can't have espionage charges or any sort,
Yeah, it's amazing. I just want to rip my hair out every time I hear that they actually throw this nothing burger of a story at us all the time. And it's just to make us relevant. I mean, on NPR, they're talking about like, oh, his funds got shut down again, sending money to Julian Assange, traitor, hero, you decide, just just like Running Man,
Yeah, they're making money off of his name. That's for sure.
Yeah, and we've discussed before, like, about Julian Assange and Edward Snowden and the whistleblowers itself. They actually make G.I. Joe style dolls in this Oregon-based company called whatsmyface.com, and you could actually buy like a Ken doll of Edward Snowden or Julian Assange.
Yeah, I've seen that actually 2 days ago. That's funny.
They took it down, the Julian Assange one, and they always come with like a little laptop. I wanted to buy it for my display case, so for when I do my show, to kind of have all the characters that I talk about or write about. And And we've discussed in private, and we've discussed on air that a lot of people in the IT field actually feel that the whistleblowers are heroes, but then you have other guys that think that they're traitors, and then there's kind of a disparity between the two. And there's the middle ground of people just don't give a shit. They just worry about their own, too. Have you noticed that people, not only in private, but would actually say, like, Edward Snowden or Julian Assange is my hero?
Well, I guess it's a prideful thing, kind of in the techie kind of standpoint. So nobody really bolsters anybody because everybody learns off of each other, So it's nice to have a group of friends where they forte in, but I don't think anybody has a fan following of sorts. Even though we're totally 100% behind Assange, I don't even think you have to be techie. Just America in general, I would believe. In my opinion, I think at least 98% of people believe in Assange because we've seen what's happened, and they're demonizing him for dropping the cables with Chelsea Manning and Edward Snowden. So,
well, why does he get so much press? I'm a little curious though why he gets as much press as he does. I mean, he could just as easily be ignored. Because a lot of people would say in some regard, it still could be helping people who might become interested in, looking more into this information. No press is bad press in a certain sense. So it would be better to ignore him, perhaps, I mean, people ignore currently a lot of the Trump administration, even, in the very liberal corporate media, for that matter. I mean, a lot of independent media, like a platform like this, will be completely ignored, of course, by any corporate level. And, they wouldn't even acknowledge our existence is the best way to approach it. So I just wonder why, a bit with Snowden, but especially with Assange, why he gets as much press coverage from the corporate media.
That's a great question, if I could take that.
Yeah.
I think that's a great question. Well, just think about what's been happening recently with Chelsea Manning. She got out of jail 3 years ago. Obama released her right after he was getting out of office. I had a lot of people ask me, "What do you think about that?" I said, "It's a straw man." Why? Why would you say that? I said, "Well, they abused her, they punished her, they kept her in solitary confinement for almost 2.5 years while they were doing all this." And we have to remember the relationship between Chelsea Manning and Julian Assange goes back to the Hillary Clinton investigation of Benghazi cables and all the money and weapons that were being transported over there. Stephen Douglas Whitener covers a lot of this when it comes to Too Fast, Too Furious. Hillary Clinton, Secretary of State, was all behind this. And so I think these big entity governments are fighting over Julian Assange and glamorizing him, I guess is what we're saying to a certain extent, because he's going to be a focal point in America's history. I really do believe it. Just like Chelsea Manning, they had, it was about 2 months ago, they tried to see if Chelsea Manning would testify against Edward Snowden. This got swept underneath the rug. If he was going to testify, they even tried to defer her to give her more jail, but her lawyer fought it and she got off. But they were trying to blackball her again, blackmail her to testifying against some of these documents, which she already got punished. So this is against double jeopardy standards of the Constitution of sorts. And I think Julian Assange is just the beginning of this new picture. He might be better off dead for the elites, but it's going to be very strange because the UK and the United States and all this with George Stephanopoulos, we're starting to see the spy game of white hats, tit for tat, people in the tech industry, people in energy sectors. And of course, there's a lot of bad things that go on underneath the table. But Julian Assange is a focal point because he has dirt on not only the UK, EU, and America, but everybody already knows his face. So he almost does have a cultic-listic following of sorts. Everybody visions him. And it's weird that Rollie had said that they won't even let you make a face of Julian Assange. That's exactly showing and indicating to us that they're trying to suppress the message, the following, because we like to wear red hats if you're a conservative. I've never worn a Donald Trump hat, but let's just say, right? It's just a symbol of people behind the message. And Julian Assange is a symbol in his own way when it comes to that message. And in the tech world, everybody's paying attention. DOD, when Rollie was talking about the Pentagon Jedi, I was reading that while you guys were talking. It's very interesting because we're about to see a technological meshmet where every square inch of every piece of land is going to be covered in some way or another. And I guess when it comes to Julian Assange, is the question is he is the face behind. Are we going to have morality with tech? Are we going to have rights and obligations? Or are we going to get rolled over again by these governments? And so right now, even the UK and I believe the US are really talking about some of this, especially with the spying that's happened. And of course, they've been trying to call Julian Assange a spy, Edward Snowden a spy, Chelsea Manning. These people were just old government workers, except Assange. He's been a part of this. He has his own story. But people are working together, and they're trying to infiltrate the people that take care of their systems. I believe Rollie Quaid made a great point. They're still going to need humans. They're still going to need humans no matter what. You can have all the technology in the world, but somebody's going to have to fix that one day. So the value of that and just having control of that mindset is very important. And Julian Assange is the face of that, I believe.
Johnny, you make me so happy that you're understanding my theory about Julian Assange and Snowden. You know, it's exactly that. There's the celebrities of this thing that's going to be rolled out with technology itself. And I know that we've talked about a little bit about Ross Ulbricht, you know, the founder of the Silk Road. And our authorities or officials tell us as well. And we talked in private about that Whole Foods is now going to open up Bitcoin. Do you think that Bitcoin itself is a psyops?
Well, that's funny. I forgot to put that in a little bit of what I was saying. That's a great question, follow-up question. When it came to the Jedi stuff that you're talking about, the Jedi cloud, what it's looking like is that's exactly what our private conversations were really leading to. They're going to roll out Bitcoin blockchain under some of this 5G Jedi cloud. So it'll do two things. It'll make it almost impenetrable, as well as whoever has the key has the key. So whoever's the key master is the key master. And it's very scary because if they roll that all together, that is the technocracy that we fear. So
and
all that.
Can I interject, Johnny? You made a great point. I just want to drive this home. Bitcoin has a giant ledger. And if you know the key, you could read all the money transfers. You don't have to be a computer whiz to understand that. Have you heard about that with Bitcoin?
Excuse me. I haven't, but
so they print it out like they print out a ledger. Yeah, exactly. If you understand the algorithm, you could actually see all the transfers, and you could see which Bitcoin is being traded to who and who's like mining itself. And they try to say that Ross Ulbricht, the supposed Dread Pirate Roberts, you know, that's the admin's name for the Silk Road apparently. And it's kind of like a mantle that handed down from like user to user, and that's where the name came from. But they're trying to say that he was the founder, the sole proprietor of the Silk Road, and he's possibly the Japanese mystic Nakamoto as well. And there's no proof of it, and it just seems like his legacy just lives on, and all the tech companies just use Bitcoin nowadays, and it's becoming the new cash system. And it all came from the supposed guy who's not even a computer expert that was just making a platform to sell online drugs. As Schumer called it, it was a drug Amazon. You know, they call this case the Schumer case.
Well, Rollie, we witnessed in the last few years here, we witnessed Bitcoin raising in value to quite a high amount. I remember it was a big thing when it reached 10,000. It ultimately reached far higher than that. Was it like 18 or more? I don't.
22, I think it got the highest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Shit, I put my money into it.
But then it crashed. Then it crashed, and it. I know there are a lot of other coins, but from what I understand, most of those require Bitcoin in some sense, where they're not completely independent in the way they're designed. So, are there really that many alternatives? Regardless, it seems like it was made to be, designed to be made an example of. I think the controllers of private central banks already got their claws in it, and hijacked it along the way, and at that point created this, peak and drop to set an example of it. And in the future, I think the private central banks want to be in control of all of these sort of digital currencies. But they don't want anything that's outside of their control, such as the Bitcoin design. That's why they want to make an example of it, a bad example of it. That's my theory.
There actually is alternative. As Ethereum was made by the Russian kid born in 1994. I think his name is like Vitalik, Butina. No, not Butina. That's somebody else. That's that Russian chick that was involved with the NRA. But there is that alternative as well. But it just seems to me that this is a cashless society, that the predictive programming, the people that follow the Bible, have been like the scribes itself have been predicting that that's their end goal, is to have a cashless system itself, and whatever in between, with the crashing and all that. I think it's just to get tech savvy people that feel that they're the alpha dog of the tech world.
We lost our. Go ahead.
What
were we going to say?
What did we lose?
Oh, I was just going to say we lost our local Bitcoin expert a couple of years back there. It would be nice if we still had that correspondent, Rollie?
Yeah, remember that article I put out on my blog site, RollieQuaid.com? I've never got more than 2,000 people visit my site in one day. And I got a letter from a PR firm from the London Stock Exchange telling me to remove the story that I wrote about the connection between Rothschild and Bitcoin, because there was like fraudulent, claims. It's in the article I republished. I didn't write it. This particular one, it was originally written by a CCN, and I was like, yeah, what the fuck ever. I'm used to cyber bullies and cyber stalkers and trolls emailing me all the time. It's actually a daily occurrence with me. So I was like, you got some credentials? Lo and behold, she sent me some credentials.
That was wasn't that Bob, right? Bitcoin Bob, was it?
Yeah, it was actually a lady. I forgot her name, but I took it off. I put it into draft, and I asked her, does she want to be part of my Hive Mind Collective and be a guest on my show on Blackballed with Rollie Quaid? She's like, I have no interest of, being part of your podcast right now, but thank you very kindly for the offer. And I told her, yeah, I'll take it off. But, if you're ever feeling froggy and want to get all that 5G Wi-Fi distortion field, want to be part of Blackball Rollie Quaid, just email me back. And yeah, no response so far.
Okay.
But I saw pictures of her. She looked like an outstanding, fine young lady.
And so the rest of your theory, I'm sure Johnny would find this interesting, what you dug up on Bitcoin.
Yeah, matter of fact, I've written several stories, and besides this one that I republished. I'm going to pull that out and start reading it, because usually when you write a lot, it gets a little hazy up there in the Chrome. But I've got like emails, like people telling me like, I don't care about the stock exchange and like who the primary shareholders of or for Bitcoin. And okay, I got the story up. So the title of the story was Rothschild's linked oil tycoon makes waves and Bitcoin mining pool. And it has a picture of a oiler like splashing Bitcoin inside of a sack. And so there's a big shakeout at Argo, and she worked for that. She worked for that as well, Argo, the lady that I mentioned. And there was an oil tycoon linked to the Rothschilds itself that is getting involved with the big shakeup going on in 2019. And he's Russian-born businessman that has a $2 billion deep interest with oil and gold mining. And Argon Mining actually revealed the big shakeup that happened and the executives. And it's very disturbing, that somebody deep with Rothschild's banking would be involved with Bitcoining, and his name is Frank Timis. And I think that they don't really want people to know. And I'm not even saying that this article that I'm relaying is factually correct, because I do not want to get sued right now. But that's the story that I put up, and they told me that it was factually wrong and that cease and desist, or there would be some sort of action unspecified. And if this is true, if any part of this is true, the greatest threat to the Rothschilds would be Bitcoin, right? Theoretically, at least, that's the hypothesis of many, right? But what if it's not? What if this is what the Rothschilds want? What if it's like a mousetrap, this idea of Bitcoin, like, reverse psychology, I don't want you to do this, don't go to bed right now. I want you to stay up with me and all night long and watch TV. And, I really want you to go to bed early, if in terms of like children and stuff like that. What if it's the opposite end results that they're trying to pull on you, and it's a psychological tactic?
Is that question directed towards me?
It was rhetorical. It's for anybody.
Oh, well, I totally agree with that. That's why I'm really hard on the Catholic Church, working with the Rockefellers and just rich people in general, working with religion. That's how they control us. It's a program. It doesn't even have to be religious. Nowadays, people worship government, and it's only going to get worse with the technology and everything that's about to change. They're going to easily be able to manipulate us quicker in the masses. I think that's what a lot of this is happening right now when it comes to theories in the Q community or just news in general. As us being independent news media, we understand a fake story when we see it, for the most part, take it with a grain of salt here and there. And I think they're really rolling out because they do have the technology, the metadata farms that I was telling you about earlier. And all of this is contributed. And they have farmers harvesting those farmers for certain data. And they have programs of the traffic and the people and the likes and the dislikes. So it's coming really quick. Block Bitcoin and all that, I'm not really an expert of. Blockchain, I am a little bit. We haven't really worked with that, but we've already seen some of this. But it's just an algorithm, and that's how they're controlling us. And social media, they're slowly doing that when it comes to the suppression. So globalists, Rothschilds, I believe there's a lot of money all around. And I don't know. I've even come to the theory recently that we might be at an extinction level here soon. They might just turn off all the fucking lights and power, and they're gonna live in their little bunkers for a few months while everybody starves to death. And the system come back up, and everybody, oh, okay, well, 500 million people died globally. It just makes it easier for them. And Rothschild, Zionist, whoever it is, whoever entity, UN, it is their agenda. I don't believe they don't have different ideologies. They really do have all the same ideologies.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct, Johnny. Johnny, and Richard, let's wrap up this show. Let's give a final thought. Richard, would you like to give a final thought before we wrap up this show?
I would just like to see us create our own parallels with technology and with the internet in future. Stay away from cloud-based storage of our files and information. Try to have a peer-to-peer internet that can't be taken down or censored in the future, and just finding ways to get around these monopolies. I mean, YouTube, Facebook. We need to actually create better approaches. But networking at the moment, every way possible, is the best thing that I can think of. But you gentlemen have a good night. I enjoyed contributing.
Oh, by the way, Stephen Whitener's mother just turned 96. Happy birthday, Mrs. Whitener.
Wow.
So, Johnny.
Remarkable, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. God bless the Whitener family. And Stephen.
Oh, and there's an announcement, right? His switching days, Stephen Douglas Whitener, is going to be Thursday now instead of Monday, folks.
Definitely tune in. He has a new name for his show now, doesn't he?
Yeah, In Plain Sight.
In Plain Sight. I like that sound. I always like the Truth Shield as well, but In Plain Sight is also a good name. That's something that he said on his first episode that he did with Revision Media, that he's not a shill for anybody. He's just a shill for the truth. I really like that as well. And Stephen is a great...
Oh, Stephen is a great host, great friend of ours,
Yep, he's definitely one of our core members,
But he's a great researcher. He's an excellent
founding
researcher.
Father.
I just also was going to add, since we're doing a little plugging here before I sign out with you gentlemen, tomorrow we have a host debuting. This will be early, folks, 1 p.m. Eastern. We're going to have a gentleman broadcasting live from South Africa. So do tune in and check out this host and his debut show on Revision Media. But I guess I'll also talk to you, Johnny, tomorrow night. But yeah, thank you, Rollie. Thank you, Johnny. You guys have a great night.
God bless.
Hey, Johnny, can you give your final thought and do not hesitate to plug anything you like to, my brother?
No, I'm sorry that your guest bailed on you, but it was a great conversation. Hopefully some people took something out of this, the people that are listening. I respect your work, Mr. Quaid, so thank you for allowing me to contribute as long as I have. But if anybody wants to find me, you can find me at my Facebook page, Liberty Light News, or libertylightnews.com. The page will be back up on the 29th. We'll start live streaming on there. So if anybody wants to start coming through at the end of this month, we're going to have a new outlook and new setup. So if anybody wants to join, door's always open.
Thank you very much for joining this podcast tonight. And thank you, audience, for joining in. And I hate to say it, BuzzFeed told us learn to code. And we told BuzzFeed learn to code after they were getting shut down and plug pulled on them. But maybe that's something we should do. We need to learn to code, and we need to create our own cybersecurity apart from these tech giants. And having said that, have a good night, folks. God bless. And I do love my fans. And if you would like to email me or contact me or drop me a source, even send me some Bitcoin, that would be acceptable. Have a good night, people. And we'll be back next week for Blackballed with Rollie Quaid right here on revisionmedia.org.
How to invent a religion.
I always knew you had to be willing to die to even
There's something wrong. What? With anything?
I feel like you won't stand there to rip your face off.
There's something wrong with anything.
I was so spun.
What's the most you ever lost in acquaintance?
The law of the jungle, sir.
The most you ever lost.